Every tree has roots, every life has branches, and every adoption has a story. Some stories begin with questions, some begin with loss. All of them are rooted in love and the search for connection. This is Janet Monroe, and this is Roots and Branches Adoption Stories, a podcast where real stories take root and grow. Because the more we share, the more we understand, and understanding helps us grow. Now, here's Janet Monroe.
Hello, and welcome to Roots and Branches Adoption Stories. As an only child, she knew deep in her bones that one day she would build a proper family of her own. What she couldn't have imagined was how that family would come together. Through loss, foster care, overseas adoption, cultural blending, and an era of adoption that looks almost unrecognizable compared to today. In this episode of Roots and Branches, Sharon shares what it was like to grow her family at a time when adoption was simpler, but not easier, and how love, intention, and determination created a legacy that now spans generations and countries. This is a story about belonging, about choosing family again and again, and about what happens when one child's loneliness becomes a lifetime of connection. So this story also brings Roots and Branches into more of an international market. We've had one other story from Australia. We've also had a story of a lady who adopted from China. But now we have Sharon's story about living in Australia and adopting a total of 7 children. So Sharon, welcome. I'm so glad that you could make it to be with me today, even though it is 9:00 in the evening, my time. And what time is it there?
Midday, exactly.
Midday. All right. So you said that you hated being an only child. Was that a feeling of loneliness that you got when you were growing up? Or was it just that you felt that you should have brothers and sisters?
Definitely not loneliness, because we lived 2 doors away from the primary school I went to, so our place was always a place where people came. But all my friends had at least 2 or 3 kids in the family, some of them 5 or 6. This is back in the 1950s. So I never considered mother, father, and me, and a grandma that lived a little distance away, but we saw several times a week, to be a family. I felt that you had to have more kids to be a family, so I just didn't consider us a proper family.
So you wanted brothers and sisters that you could play with, that you could fight with, that you could argue with, that you could love, and just extend everything, right?
Sort of, but I just wanted to be correct. Correct was more than 1 kid.
Right. So I take it that you knew that you wanted a larger family, but how large did you imagine that being?
Probably, well, when I went into my first marriage, I think I aimed for 6. The plan was to have 6 children. Certainly wasn't planning to go as far as I went, but the plan was to have 6. So I guess that was a bit over the norm, but that was what I was looking at.
And your husband at the time was willing to go along with that plan for 6 children?
Actually, yes, he was. He was another New Zealander and certainly didn't object to it, but things changed, so we didn't quite make that.
Well, you had your early pregnancy you had a loss and medical trauma that changed your life, right?
Right.
And how did that experience shape your view of motherhood? And how did it contribute to your future?
The fact, well, when I had an abruptio placenta, and what should have happened was that I should have just been whipped straight in for a cesarean, but I'd changed doctors to the doctor that all my friends at work had. Bad move. He wasn't into cesareans and allowed the child to drown in placental blood, and then they had to basically rip the poor child out, and he lived for 26 hours. I was stuck in a room with half a dozen other mothers who were feeding, so I actually got up and walked out and went straight to my late father's doctor, told him the story, and he sent me off to Auckland. We're in New Zealand, not Australia. To Auckland to see a professor up there, tell him the whole story, who immediately knew what had happened. So that was the experience at the beginning.
So your child lived for 26 hours? And
Yes.
then you had to go through the trauma of his death.
I just walked out of the hospital. It was ridiculous staying there. I did, as I say, I went to that, my doctor, my late father's doctor, straight away the same day and said, "Hey, this is what happened. What do you think happened?" And yeah.
How did your life with your husband continue after that?
Oh, it was kind of strange. I went back to work, but then we were too young to adopt. I looked at adoption then, I have to admit, but we were way too young to adopt. We were only 21, and you had to be 25 to adopt in New Zealand. And there was really no reason at that stage too, because we didn't know there was going to be further problems. And I looked into fostering, and our foster child arrived, I think 2 or 3 months after that, at 22 months old. So he became, my oldest son, and is still my oldest son.
Were you able to adopt him, or did he stay as a foster child?
Unfortunately, his mother would not allow adoption, so he remained as a foster child, which was really unfortunate, but that's the way it was. So, yeah, in many ways, it sort of meant that we stayed together longer than we might have, because we didn't want this youngster to go back into the system, because like many fostering systems, fostering in New Zealand, the system sucked. The kids went from home to home, and we didn't want that to happen, so we stayed together long enough for me to get pregnant again. But I did have another miscarriage, and then I got pregnant again and had 7 months on bed rest, which didn't do a lot for our marriage. No, not on bed rest. I was in hospital that time. I was in hospital for 7 months that time.
So you did not have an easy time with pregnancies.
No, I definitely do not have a good gynecological history.
All right. So after 7 months in hospital, you gave birth to another child?
Yep. That was
And
another
that
boy.
was male,
So
female?
I had 2 boys. Another boy. So I had 2 boys, my foster child and Clay.
All right. So you adopted and fostered across cultures and countries. How did that come about?
Well, the 7 months that I was in hospital, my husband had a bit of a good time out there, and I stuck around until that young man was 1, and then I left because he just wasn't behaving correctly. And sometime after that, I met a guy. It must have been when Clay was about a year old, because I was still feeding him, but my mum could babysit them at night. So I went and worked in a nightclub, and I decided I quite liked the fire eater at the nightclub, and the fire eater quite liked me. Plus, although he was Samoan Chinese and Cameron was Maori, Irish Maori, actually, we now know, they did have a similarity in looks, and that's how I came to start the cross-cultural adoptions.
So your fire eater became your second husband?
Yes, yes.
And that took you to Samoa to get where you started adopting from different cultures?
Right. Well, he was a really great stepfather to the two boys. And eventually I got pregnant again. And although I was about 3 weeks in hospital, but then I was home on bed rest for the rest of the time. Personally, I would rather be in hospital. It's miserable being home on bed rest, seeing everything that needs doing. Fortunately, my mother was still alive and lived quite handy, so she helped out with the boys. And eventually I had my first daughter, Luana. But by then I decided, I don't think I'm too hot on this. I'm not a great reproducer. So when we were down in Wellington, which is in the bottom half of the North Island of New Zealand, at my husband's uncle's 50th birthday, I think it was, he looked in the pram and looked at Luana and said, "Why don't you go over to Samoa and get some of the other kids?" And I sort of said, "Oh?" That sounded too easy. But actually, it was quite easy. And not long after that, Ben went first. He went over to get things organised, and I followed 2 or 3 weeks after with the kids, with the 3 kids. So we lived in a village in Samoa, and the adoption process began.
You were living in Samoa when you adopted, and you adopted Ben's nieces or nephews?
The first baby we adopted was not one of his nieces and nephews. The first baby belonged to a lady in the village. Let's say she was quite an active lady in the village. She used to walk around with 2 little girls. One was about, I can't remember the ages now. It must have been about 3 and 6, and a little baby that I assumed was just a few weeks old. And the original child that Ben had planned for us to adopt was the middle child of this lady. But this youngster took one look at us, at me anyway, and screamed her head off and hid. And at that stage, I hadn't had experience with this sort of experience anyway. So I remember that night I said to Ben, "Oh, do you think she'd let us adopt the baby?" And he said, "Well, why don't you ask her?" If you sort of imagine a village where everybody kind of walks around, I don't know if you can imagine a native village, that's what it was. So the next day I went out and looked for this lady, and very, very worriedly said, "You wouldn't let us take the baby, would you?" And she said, "Here," and handed over this baby, who turned out to be 10.5 months old. She was only 9 pounds. Severe malnutrition. So did the other middle one have severe malnutrition. And that was the first one. So we moved into Aggie Gray's Hotel in Apia because I needed decent food for this child, and they took credit cards. And there was no food left in the village at that stage. And and I did mention to Janet the horror on the faces of some of the quite rich people in the resort as they realised there was quite a lot of poverty out there. They couldn't believe that this tiny baby was 10.5 months old. But before we even left to get on the plane, she was sitting up. And she was standing up within a few weeks. This tiny little thing standing up. So that was the first one.
So she just gave you the baby. Did you have to do any kind of paperwork to make it official?
Oh yes, yeah, yeah. We didn't even see her after that. I suppose Ben went with and got signatures from her. She just handed the baby over there. We had to rush off and buy baby gear because we only had gear for a 4-year-old. And then you just go to the court and did the adoption. It's quite
So
funny
it
because
was
later,
easy.
pardon?
It was easy.
Oh, it was easy. And then you put them on Ben's passport because in those days kids didn't need their own passports. Popped the child on Ben's passport and flew back. That was number one.
So okay, so now you have two of your own children. You have one foster child, Cam, and now you have Luana, which is your
Luana's my
first adopted
daughter.
child.
No, Tessa's the first adopted child.
Oh,
The
okay.
boys are Cameron and Clay. Clay's my birth child. Luana's my birth child, and Tessa was the first adopted child.
What made you go back for more?
Well, the rallies got hold of. I was quite happy to have more, and the rallies got hold of Ben, my ex, and said, "Will you come and get this one and this one?" So this time he just flew
So,
over on his own, did all the paperwork, came back with 3 youngsters, 2 girls, they were around about 12, 13, and Grace was about 6. Now, Grace was a different kettle of fish because she was from American Samoa, and she couldn't be put on Ben's passport. She came back and she was actually adopted in New Zealand.
so
This is the older one's just walked in the door now.
oh, okay. So now we've got your family and Tessa and 3 more. And that was done the
Basically,
same
this
way
is
by
what
just going to a judge and having them sign papers and putting them on Ben's passport.
Yep. And Bill Bolden and the family jumped from 4 to 7.
And then you did it again.
Yes, I'm just trying to remember the order of it. Yeah, the order of it. The next time there was a request from somebody who was actually asking him to take their child, and that was a little girl and another one of his nephews. And he went back again, did all the signing of the papers, popped them on his passport, and came back, and we were up to 9. And it was great. The house expanded as necessary. Yeah, it was really good. And I kept saying to people, hey, it's much easier having 9 kids than what one would have been. And it really was. It was fun.
So Ben's
Yeah,
passport was getting full.
yeah, pretty well, yeah.
And did you get one more? Was there one more that came
We
as well?
did. We did. There was still that little girl, the sister or half sister. We're just waiting for DNA results to find out which, of the first one, who screamed so loudly when we confronted her 2 or 3 years before. So I really felt guilty about that one because I remembered how I used to watch her older sister hitting her around the head and being really unpleasant to her. And she was so skinny with malnutrition. So he went back. I kind of organised that. He went back and collected that young lady. So that was number 10. And that had to be it because, yeah, although he was being a great stepfather to my kids and to some of his foster kids, some of his adopted kids, the older girls he wasn't too great to. And I didn't like that. And I had another player there as well. So I decided I might just depart, which I did. So if you can
So then you
imagine
became a single
moving from
mom.
one city to another with 10 kids, it was interesting.
I cannot imagine that at all, to be honest. I had a hard time moving with two children, so it's very difficult to imagine moving with 10. But then you became a single mom
Yep.
with 10 children to raise.
Hmm.
You went to university
I was doing my
at that
master's
time.
at university, and also once I'd done my master's, I was lecturing at the university. Yeah.
So, how did you manage to take care of 10 children?
Remember, there's big age gaps. I mean, my oldest is about to turn 55 in a couple of days. The youngest must be about 42 now, so there was a big age gap there. Lecturing was during the day when they were at school, so you got used to it. There has been one effect. I hate cooking now. It seems pointless cooking for two people when you're used to cooking for 10 or 12 or more.
That would make a difference, I'm sure. Yes. Um, did your children help with the cooking? The
Yes,
older, or just
they all
looking
did,
after
and
the
that is actually the Samoan way as well. The children all help with the work. They did did vegetables. They all had to make their own beds, make their school lunches. They were very, very independent. And when I look at what kids do now, which isn't very much around the house, they all say they're really glad that they had to. They all grew up being able to cook, being able to do things, and very competent lot of kids. So it has its advantages that, when they have a lot to do. But they still did lots of other things. I mean, the middle ones, like I remember within about 3 weeks of Josie, the last one, arriving, she was in a dance recital with her brothers and sisters. All the middle ones did ballet, and what did they do? Ballet, tap, that sort of thing. They were all went to Sunday school. No Busy Bees then. I would have had them all at Busy Bees, but Busy Bees didn't exist by then. And I think we didn't talk about
you.
Busy Bees, but that was a big part of my growing up that caused me to do all this, I
Okay.
think.
So, explain Busy Bee and what that was.
Okay. Busy Bees was sort of a group that came with the Presbyterian Church in Napier. Well, I'm not sure why I went to the Presbyterian Sunday school, because we weren't Presbyterians, we were Anglicans, but I did. That's where I got sent. And Busy Bees met every Saturday and did lots of handcrafts. We made lots of things to sell every year for the missions. And while we were learning about the missionaries, we also learnt a lot about the poor, starving children in all the missionary countries. And that was when I actually made that decision. Very, very early, when I was very young, probably about 8 or 9. So Busy
The
Bees
decision to adopt
had
from,
a big, big influence on me.
and that influenced you to adopt from out of country.
Definitely, definitely, because that was something I planned to do right from then, when I was just a kid. Even if I hadn't had any gynecological problems, that was what the decision was.
As a single mom with 10 children,
Hmm.
did you feel that you now had a proper family?
It was a different family. You got a lot of prejudice from people, a lot of horrified looks, but usually they couldn't find too much to moan about. Uh,
So, why did you have the
every,
prejudice from people and the horrified looks?
because people assume that if you've got 10 kids, you can't be looking after them properly. But they all were. They were all doing things. They were all successful. A lot of them were very sporty. Um, 3 of them were district swimming reps for a long time. Another one was a shot put rep. Yeah, they all. I lived kind of between swimming pools and netball, and now I see my daughters doing the same thing. So I've got my revenge. They are now mum's cabs.
So how do you compare adoption then to adoption now?
I think it would be a lot more difficult now. For starters, you'd never be allowed to adopt that many children now, I don't think. Secondly, you couldn't just put them on your passport. Apart from anything else, I don't think you'd be able to afford it nowadays. But adoption here in Australia is really difficult. It really, really is difficult to adopt within Australia. And that's why a lot of people go overseas to do it. In New Zealand, I honestly don't know what it was like to try and adopt within New Zealand in those days because I didn't have to think about it. I didn't need to find out. I don't know. But it was a lot
It just
easier earlier when I was a youngster. I know that.
So what do you think is happening in Australia with regards to adoption? You say it's very difficult to adopt in Australia, but is there a need for adoption?
I don't know a lot about it, and you'll be talking to another lady who knows a lot more about it than I do. I don't know. I do know that I keep hearing that it's really difficult to adopt within Australia, and that is why people still spend all that money to go over to the few countries that are still letting their children be adopted. I mean, I think there was way back in the Vietnamese War and that, I think a lot of children got airlifted to Australia that are now looking for their own families. And I think it's become there's been a lot of suspicion in people that try and adopt from overseas because you're never quite sure, is that child really an orphan? Is that child really, not got a family? Or what's the story? There's a lot of suspicion and worry about it now. Yeah.
Look, and you don't believe that you would have been able to adopt and have the same family today as you were able to do back then?
Oh, definitely not. Definitely not. No. No.
You and Ben separated.
Mhm. Yep.
Did he still pay attention to the children?
Oh, yeah.
Because
That
a
was
lot of
good.
them were his relatives, right?
They'd go to him or for Christmas and that, which suited me fine. That's quite funny because I was never allowed to cook Christmas dinner because I don't know about all Samoans, but a lot of Samoan men don't consider that women can cook a decent Christmas dinner, which suited me fine because I was quite happy to hand it over to somebody else. As I said, I don't really enjoy cooking that much. I did it because I had to. So they always went to him for Christmas dinner or for Christmas up to Napier or sometimes to other places, wherever, or to other relations. We had relations in Wellington as well on that side still that we saw. And Wellington was a lot closer to Palmerston North where we were living. Palmerston was kind of halfway between Napier, where we started from, and Wellington, which is the capital and is down the bottom of the North Island. So, yeah, he saw them quite a lot, but sometimes didn't turn up, or sometimes we got all the way to Napier and he wasn't there. So it sort of got a bit less. Now that you don't want me to go on ahead, do you? Because the situation now is much better.
Well,
He's calmed down.
you had 10 adopted children. Are they still all in your life?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely. They're not all in his. The older girls, the three that are still in New Zealand, won't have anything to do with him. That's the two older ones and the youngest. Just cut completely. The ones here do, and we often all get together like for sports things. we often catch up. That's about the only time that we get to catch up with the grandkids is for sports, because the grandkids are pretty sporty and into all sorts of stuff. My birth son Clay actually took Ben's surname, so we have got a European young man with a Samoan, Chinese Samoan surname, which was interesting. Now, he actually remarried a few years ago, and my husband now, Peter, is a minister. And Peter actually performed the wedding, and Ben was there as father of the groom. And it was just the most amazing wedding ever. Everybody was just so happy and got on so well. And it was, you just don't know, you wouldn't have believed that things could have been so peaceful after all that. But he has simmered down and stopped drinking and stopped womanizing and stopped doing all those things. He's got old like the rest of us. We're all too old to do those things now. So, but it's
I was going
very,
to
very
say,
good
you're
now.
telling me that he
Good
grew
now
up.
situation.
Yeah. I can imagine what that was like. My husband drank a lot as well, but I was lucky that he stopped for me because I was wife number 3 and he didn't really want to go for wife number 4, so he didn't have
Actually,
much
that
of a
must
choice
be
in
it.
the matter.
He stopped for this one. Well, the kids reckon he hasn't stopped, that he still drinks a bit much, but he doesn't go over the top, and I think she keeps him under the thumb. Maybe that's it. Maybe with a as they improve as they go through.
All right, so you adopted from Samoa. So how did raising children who didn't share your language or culture shape you as a parent?
Unfortunately, they weren't allowed to speak Samoan at home, which I'm very disappointed about because it would have been so good. The little ones do not speak Samoan. The older ones still speak the language, but the younger ones, unless they're married to, I think Tess does now because she's actually with a Samoan guy, but the younger ones are not, and they do not speak the language. And I think that's a shame because it would be so good to have another language. Luana wanted to do air hostessing at one stage. She needed another language, and if she'd been allowed, my thing would have been that they speak Samoan at home. But I can sort of see his point. He thought if they spoke Samoan at home, they wouldn't learn English and they wouldn't do so well in school. So it's a bit of a catch-22 situation. But when you have to speak the language, they learn very quickly, and they all did pretty well at school, even though, they walked into classrooms not right from the start, not speaking the language, the older ones. Yeah, and as I said to Josie when she came over 3 or 4 weeks after she arrived, she was in a dance recital with the others. Still probably not speaking very much English, but she was in there.
How many grandchildren and great-grandchildren do you have?
I have 28 grandchildren. Peter's got 6 grandchildren, and I have 21, about to be 22 great-grandchildren.
Wow. What do you feel most proud of when you think of all those great-grandchildren and grandchildren?
I think I'm proud that everybody's actually functioning okay. They are very competitive, sporty kids. There's one came just over from New Zealand on a scholarship. Oh no, hang on, sorry, that's a great niece. No, but a couple of the boys got scholarships to really prestigious schools with their rugby. They're playing. None of them are swimming now, but they're playing netball, touch, whatever sort of rugby they play in Australia. I'm no rugby expert, but they're all very good. Most of them are very, very good at their sports, and they're succeeding and they're getting places. So I think I'm really glad that, you know, that I've managed to produce something like that. Nobody's got into major trouble or anything. So,
I had a question I was going to ask, and it's just gone straight from my head. Oh,
sorry.
when did you bring the family over from New Zealand to Australia?
Right. Well, I came over to Australia in 2000. Cameron came over here first. I think he came in about 1999 or 1998. No, 1999. And then Clay also came over to Australia. Now, Luana was actually training to, back in 96, she was training up for the 2000 Olympics, but our house burnt down totally and she lost all her stuff, and she actually didn't swim after that. Tessa did. She went off to a carnival the day after and came back with a whole lot of medals and got a photo in the paper standing outside the burnt house with all her medals. But what Luana did was she came over, she was working, so she got a job at the Olympics in 2000 and she stayed. So there were three of them over here. I came over here with the younger ones and the dog in 2000. By that time, I'm trying to think when, yeah, it was Tessa came with me. Josie was still in New Zealand because she was working and living with somebody there. But she followed. She wanted to come over, so I brought her over. And then Grace was already married with two youngsters and she came over. So now there's 7 of us over here. Oh, and Utu came over. He's in Kalgoorlie. He's actually a Mormon bishop in Kalgoorlie with 4 very talented kids. So there's 2 in Kalgoorlie, 4
And
here,
they've all made you proud.
and 1 in Western Australia. Clay's just moved to Western Australia with Caroline. Yeah. But we're all in contact all the time, yeah.
Now, has your idea of a proper family changed over time?
I still don't think. I realise that some families have to have 1 child. I mean, my parents were really old. I'm amazed that I arrived, but I didn't see that at the time. At the time, I really blamed them. I sort of blamed them for not having any more. But my father was 52 when I was born and my mother 39. So I'm sure I was a bit of a shock to the system after 5 years of marriage. So I excuse them now for that. I still think, though, I still look at only children and feel very sorry for them. Not because I think they're lonely. They're not. But I look at the relationships between my kids and think, I can't even understand that relationship because I didn't have it. And I think relationships with siblings is something natural that most people have. And I think it's a relationship that people that don't have it can't really understand.
What do you want people today to understand about adoption? It's changed so much since you did it, but
Oh, it's changed an awful lot. But I think there's something wrong with a world where there are evidently a lot of children that are homeless or starving or everything else, and adoption is so difficult. There's so many facets to it. I mean, I'm sure some people adopt for the totally wrong reasons. We've learnt that from some of the disasters in the United States. But I also think it's an awful shame that there are so many orphaned children overseas or anywhere else that it's almost impossible to adopt. I mean, I'm now married to somebody who was adopted, and where his life might have gone if he hadn't been is questionable. And I think the same for some of my youngsters, and they think the same too, that things could have been a whole lot different. So I think it's a good thing. Yeah, it's a difficult one. I still think it's a good thing, but it has to be for the right reasons, and there does have to be some control, some controls, but maybe not as many controls as there are now. I don't know, because I don't really know the laws here in Australia or in New Zealand now for that
No,
matter.
I tend to agree. Adoption is something that's necessary because there are so many children that don't have homes and so many children that can thrive on love if,
Mm-hmm.
if they're adopted for the right reasons. Um, but I think adoption is something that's necessary that we can't get away from, even
Absolutely,
if
yeah.
it's by families. You know, like you have a car accident and mom and dad pass away, and you've got
Mm,
two children left with no home to go to a family and to be able to be adopted by that family so that they feel that they belong. I
yeah.
think one of the things about adoption is from there's a book out called The Primal Wound, and they talk about that attachment to the mother between the fetus and the mother, and the when they part in adoption, like for me giving my son up for adoption, when they parted, they have attachment problems because even though back then, 1970, nobody ever thought about that, but carrying that son for 9 months in you, he becomes part of you. And then when all of a sudden he's gone and he's gone somewhere else, there's not that same attachment because it's not somebody they know. So a lot of adopt children have attachment values because they were attached to the birth mom, but don't know anything better. Did you find anything with the children you adopted? Did you find any problems with attaching?
No, not really. No, I didn't. But I think it's so different because it was all forced adoptions a lot of the time in those days, wasn't it? And back even
Yes,
further, and I think adoptions were forced, and I think
there was a lot of
that is
adoptions
absolutely horrific.
uh, where the mothers didn't have the choice. The choice
It's
was
right.
made for them.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yeah.
I was lucky, or I was able to make that choice myself because I was
Oh,
21 when I
right.
gave birth. So
Yes.
I was of
Yes.
legal age and could make the choice. And my parents couldn't make me do anything different. You know, they they didn't have that say. So I made the choice for my son to be adopted.
Right.
But there
But
are a
what's
lot of people. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say something I've always made a point of is making sure that my adopted youngsters and Cameron, even though he wasn't legally adopted, have the chance to have contact with their own families and their birth parents, um, which I've done for the two girls that were from the lady in the village. That didn't work out the best, but at least they had the opportunity. Um, the I think one of my older daughters, I think, has been back and seen her parents who've since passed. Uh, yeah, I think most of them have had the chance to, and I always encouraged it. I've actually met Cameron's birth father, who's still alive in his 80s in New Zealand. We spent some time with him, the year before last, lots of photos, and met his half sisters and family. We we bought DNA kits back when we were on our DNA journey for the kids. Some of them have done their DNA. Some don't want to. Most of them want to though, and we're just waiting for results for those because I think it's really important for them to know of their own heritage as well. Because the five who are relations, are actually Chinese Samoan, not just Samoan, they're Chinese Samoan, and they have got an absolutely fascinating history. If you think of their surname is Shek, and their great-grandfather, I think it is the brother of Chiang Kai-shek, who founded Taiwan. So they've got rallies everywhere. So we're waiting for the DNA to come back for some of those. Because Utu is a Mormon bishop, he's very much, needless to say, into family history, as all Latter-day Saints are. And he actually wants my family history as well, which I'm going to give to him because he's the most interested, because he knows that it is my family history, my family and the history that happened to them, who resulted in them coming to New Zealand and their lives now. So everybody's history imparts on everybody else, every little thing. So I've always encouraged this looking to their own birth families as well. I think it's really important.
I agree with you. At the time when my son was put up for adoption, adoptions were what was called closed. So there was no information given to the child about his birth parents, and no information about the birth parents giving to the adoptive parents either, until later on in the early 2000s when they passed a law to make it open, and that information should become available. But it needs to be available. And like you need to have the birth parents involved so that the child can still have those attachments and maintain just a great relationship all around. And that makes your proper family, right?
Yes, as I say, two of them, and the two that weren't rallies, and actually one of the older ones that was a rally, did not have good experiences, unfortunately. But they had the opportunity, they did it, and they found out for themselves. There was no mystery out there or anything. So, and
no, it's a choice that they could make.
They had perfectly good families and siblings and parents of their own now, so it didn't matter. So, yeah.
Okay, what would you say to someone questioning whether a family can be built intentionally?
I think you can build a family intentionally, although how many people do? I suppose it's possible, but I think ours wasn't intentional in a way. I mean, I certainly wanted a big family, but I had no idea how it was going to come about. That's sounding a bit like designer babies when you say that, and I totally disapprove of those. But yeah, I think to a degree you can plan to have a certain number of children, but hey, life gets in the way, all sorts of things happen, and you never know what is around the corner, so you just don't know what's going to happen. So building intentionally is really a thought.
Now you've turned your life around. You've got all these children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and you're now married to a man that you went to school with.
Yes.
When you were like 7, 8 years old?
7. We met at singing school when we were 7. We didn't go to school together until we hit high school. But we met when I was 7, he was 8. We were both singing at an old ladies' home with our singing teacher. They had old ladies.
And you parted ways after high school and went around the world, I think. How did you get back together? How did you meet again?
Through one of my students, believe it or not. One of my adult students or teenage students, a long time ago, was on Facebook, and don't know why, I was just flipping through his friends, which I don't normally do anyway, and I couldn't believe that I saw who I saw there. And I had some photos from when we were in Macbeth together. So I inboxed him and said, I've got some photos. Would your kids like them? Because he looked all happily married. And hey, ministers, you always assume ministers are happily married. It seems they're not. But you make this assumption. And then when we met up, I gave him the photos, and we still sort of half stayed in contact on the odd thing. And then about a year later, another one of my students had to do a religion assignment on the denomination that Peter was working for at that stage. So I said to my student, hey, I know somebody who'll be able to help you with that. I'll inbox them. So when I inboxed Peter saying, can I get the student to send you the assignment? He said, let's meet up. And I thought, oh, okay. And we met up, and the first thing he told me was that he'd been separated for 18 months at that stage. And we've been together ever since. I think that was the same time he told me he was actually adopted as well. So it's 2 shocks in one day.
Okay, so that was the time when you were able to tell him that you had 10 children.
Yes. I think I told him, probably mentioned that before, sort of a couple of years before when we sort of first met up, but not really, he was married, I was still married, and so I could have mentioned it, but he wasn't too shocked. Nothing much shocks Peter now.
If you could speak to the only child that you were back then, what would you tell yourself now?
What would I tell myself now? Oh, this is like a table topic. I honestly haven't got a clue. I was a very strange child. I was an argumentative, neurodivergent, very bright, but odd child. And I would get fixated on things, obviously, people, ideas. I guess I'd tell that child, hey, just keep going. You never know what the future's going to hold. I don't know. It's a hard one. It's one that I hate answering. Or when I get asked about my teenage years, what would I tell my teenage self? Sorry, I can't give you a good one on that one.
Okay. That's all right. We've had a good run here. So Sharon McRoberts set out to build the family she never had. And in doing so, she created a legacy that spans generations, cultures, and continents. Her story reminds us that family isn't defined by numbers, paperwork, or biology. It's defined by commitment, presence, and love that shows up again and again. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who believes family can be built in more than one way. This is Roots and Branches, where every story matters because every family does. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to Roots and Branches, Adoption Stories, where every tree has roots, every life has branches, and every adoption has a story. Got an adoption story you want to tell? Want to learn more about adoption stories? Then visit rootsandbranchesadoptionstories.com.